Good afternoon. I'm Arun Serafin, the Executive Director of the Emerging Technologies Institute at the National Defense Industrial Association. I want to thank all attendees for your support of NDIA and ETI and for joining us for today's webinar, Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, UAP 101, with Dr. Douglas Bittner. This webinar is part of our Tech 101 series, where we present complex technological concepts as introductory webinars with a focus on their national security implications. We've all seen the headlines, heard the speculation, and maybe even watched a few mysterious videos, but what do we really know about unidentified anomalous phenomena? While many UAP sightings turn out to be misidentified aircraft or weather phenomena or even deliberate hoaxes, a small number remain unexplained, raising questions that demand serious scientific attention. For researchers and national security professionals alike, distinguishing between the ordinary and the truly anomalous is a growing priority. Today's webinar will explore the complexities of UAP identification, diving into how analysts separate fact from fiction, the methodologies they use to investigate sightings, and why better data is essential for deeper understanding. We'll also look at confirmed misidentifications, surprising explanations for puzzling reports, and those rare cases that continue to defy easy answers. We're going to also look at how new technologies and policies might help shape the future of UAP research and why these efforts are a matter for both science and national defense. Now, some administrative remarks before we begin. One, all attendee lines are muted. If you have a question during the webinar, you can submit your question in the question box in the webinar panel on the right side of your screen. You can submit your questions throughout the whole presentation, and at the end, we'll do our best to get through all of the questions during a Q&A portion. We're recording today's webinar for members who are unable to attend, and we'll post the recording on our website and our YouTube channel. With that, I want to introduce our speaker. Dr. Doug Bittner is an adjunct assistant professor in the University of Utah's Department of Mechanical Engineering, and he's also the deputy chief scientist at the Acquisition Innovation Research Center at the Stevens Institute of Technology. He spent 20 years with the Aerospace Corporation, including working on software and systems engineering programs underneath the Sentinel missile program. He's earned a PhD in astronautical engineering from USC. And Doug, I want to thank you for recording a great podcast with me and following up with this Tech 101. With that, Doug, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rune, and thank you also to NDIA for the invite. This has kind of been a hobby of mine for a little bit, and it's I would say starting to get a lot more attention as we start to see more and more things in the sky or report in the sky that we just don't know what they are, right? So let me flip over to my slides. Hopefully you can see them shortly. You can confirm that you see them. I'll turn off my video.
We can see him.
Awesome. Okay. One sec. Turn the video off. Alrighty. So one of the things I'm going to do is kind of go through just a little bit in terms of the different types of things that get misidentified as UAPs. And fundamentally, what I'll do is I'll go through some very specific cases that I personally have analyzed as I would say the analyst behind the scenes. And we'll start with this one that was called UFO over New York City. This one in particular broke on News Nation. There was a lady that actually had captured this on her cell phone, and she posted it on Reddit. But before I get there, I want to go through examples of things that we actually have lots of misidentifications of. So, for example, balloons, that'll be the UFO over New York City case. And this one in particular ended up being a party balloon. But there's also very high altitude balloons that you can get glints off of, for example, weather balloons, science balloons. Then the other thing that we see a lot of are flaring satellites, especially Starlinks. And I'll describe what a flaring satellite is. We get launch vehicle exhaust examples, in particular from SpaceX. And then high altitude aircraft, eVTOLs, or basically vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, some of which you see down here in the bottom left. Um, and then just industrial size drones, because people aren't used to seeing drones that big, especially if they're flying at night, potentially helicopters at distance. And then there's other phenomena like weather sprites, jets, and elves. You'll see those down here kind of on the right-hand side. Um, and I've actually been through and looked at stuff where I had backlit insects in two cases. One case I had a dragonfly that was caught at night, which was an interesting one. And then I had a daytime case of an insect that flew through. It just happened to be somebody that was videoing near Skinwalker Ranch. But fundamentally, what we try and do is I personally try and treat it like a game of Clue. So it's okay, what are the, pieces of information, who, what, where, when, and why. And then I'm trying to utilize information that's actually in the video. And so if you think about Clue, you've got these different suspects, right? Where it is. In this particular case, this video, as I mentioned, she had posted it on Reddit. Well, somebody had taken that Reddit video, or excuse me, on social media video, and reposted it on Reddit without her permission. And so this one in particular, I was working with Ben Hansen behind the scenes as his analyst. And what I started to do on this one was I actually took the Reddit video, and I took a screen grab of about this much of it and submitted it to Google Lens for an image search, and I was able to identify it as the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. And then one of the things I noticed in here is you see this little shadow. You can tell it's a pretty clear day. From the Reddit video, it said it was, I believe it was March 25th of 2023, or 2024, excuse me, to where we had, I would say, online tools that I can take. And if I know the date and if I know where, I can now try and estimate what time of the day it was just based on that shadow. And so I was able to get within about 30 minutes. But part of the problem with the Reddit posted video or even social media is I don't have this critical information called metadata, which has the exact day and time, at least exact within a few seconds or whatever your discrepancy in your phone clock is. And if the user has enabled it, I can also get GPS location. Now, on this particular one, what happened was Enigma Labs had contacted Ben Hansen, and he was shocked that they actually had the original witness. And so he interviewed her, was able to get a lot more information. In particular, she was able to provide him with the flight that she was on, the actual time that the video was taken, and then she actually provided the video to us. So from that, then I'll say I was kind of off to the races. I now had the flight as a Spirit Airlines flight. I knew she was sitting about here in the aircraft because now when I had the original video, what happened was I had over here in this side of the aircraft, I could see the tip of the wing. And so now I had a little bit more information in terms of about where this thing was flying in terms of, okay, it wasn't inside the wing, it was definitely outside the wing. And then from the aircraft now and the time, I can pull down what's called ADS-B, which is this automatic dependent surveillance broadcast data, which gives me GPS coordinates for the flight as well as barometric altitude. And so what I did is I pulled all that information, pulled it into Google Earth Pro, and was then from the actual metadata from the phone able to identify where she was when she started the recording, and then about where she was when that object had passed. And so now after that happened, I now had basically five full frames. Whereas on Reddit, I had one of the frames that kind of had truncated the object. And so utilizing the ADS-B GPS information, now what we can do is actually also, oh, I want to go back really quick here. One of the other things I can do from the day is I can figure out what the winds aloft were. So I had pulled that from Iowa State. I know what the aircraft speed was. It was 207 knots. That's about 350 feet per second. And so with these vectors, I can come up with, what the actual direction of travel of that object was in the video and about how fast it was going. Okay, so now going on to the next, if you remember your high school trigonometry, so if I've got the altitude, it's about 2,700 feet off the water. Now what I can do is I can use spherical trigonometry and spherical geometry to actually figure out the distance to other objects that are in the frame. And so I know the Verrazano Bridge span here. I can get that GPS coordinate. And then using that spherical geometry, we can come up with what that ground distance is. And then the triangulation, the trigonometry, if you will, I can now get estimates for about how far the witness, Miss Reyes, was sitting in the aircraft from that object. And so from that, now what I can do is I can say, hey, if that object was at that same distance using something we call, basically ratios, I can say if it's a 1-to-1, that object should have been about 193 feet in the, what she was seeing was 193 feet. But we also know that that wasn't seen by anybody else. There were no other reports. So that was highly unlikely as being that far away. And so, again, how I get there is basically it's about 3.6 times what that object was to get that full span distance. So now you think about that. Okay, it had to be much closer. It had to be back in here somewhere. Another thing I did was, since it wasn't that far in the past, I'm able to pull up using Weather Underground the history of the winds on that day. What you can see here is it was very gusty at LaGuardia from about 6:30, 7 o'clock until about noon that day. And then if you look further along Long Island, pull the Long Island's MacArthur Airport information, and you can see gusts actually persisted much longer during the day, actually much further past the time than when she had the actual sighting, which was at about 2:30 local time. And then you can see also the direction of the winds at the time too. So that information was critical. Now, next thing I did was I knew I had some kind of an oblong object. Initially, I thought it was some kind of a balloon or potentially what I call a UAV at an illegal altitude. And I think I could actually take my mechanical engineering students and actually get them to build something that could actually go up to 2,000 feet using some aerodynamic tricks. But I was able to identify this particular party balloon. And then what I did is at a conference I was talking at, I had one of my colleagues record me. So I had the balloon. What I did is I put a tape measure here on the ground, and I actually, using a very similar phone to what she had, recorded myself going out. Now I had two potential distances that I thought it could be at. I thought it could be at about 64 feet or 94 feet. But what I was able to do is the size of this balloon right here, ever so slightly rotated, um, it comes out to be of almost exact match at about 94 feet. And so literally what I'm doing is I'm zooming in on this and I'm counting the pixels that go across that object and then counting the pixels of me holding that same object ever so slightly rotated. And so when everything's done and said, this is kind of what it looks like for this particular analysis. So I had what is the Reddit poster? No, it was not the Reddit poster. It was Miss Michelle Race. I had the Who. We had the very specific information about the airline. I was able to use FlightAware, Google Earth. I could actually put the object in the video, right? And I've got all this information about, kind of fundamentally where it happened, right? The when and the day, the initial estimate was from this online shadow map. And so the object, here's my hypothesized object. The actual who, that's unknown, right? So I don't know who actually released that balloon, but I'm hypothesizing that, it's potentially a birthday, anniversary, or sales, some kind of a sales event. And so this is a case where I call it about 90% probability that I've identified the correct object. I'll give myself a 10% error for being wrong. Okay. Maybe somebody comes up with additional video showing 193 foot object at distance. So other cases that I've worked on, in particular, have been Starlink satellites that have been misidentified as UAPs. And so this case on the right, we actually published a paper. I worked with an individual from the University of Hawaii on it, and a couple of one grad student and one non-grad student, to where we put a paper out there that literally very carefully was able to go through and from this photograph from the actual pilot, we had not only two photographs, but we also had some video. Now, what was interesting in the video is that you could see gaps in here, but when the photograph was taken, it had a much longer exposure time, and so it just looked like this kind of an object. And that's how it was described by the actual pilots, as kind of like this tube long object. They thought it was about a mile in length. This happens from a misperception in terms of distance. And so that fundamentally, how that happens is you get a specular reflection off the different satellites, and they're far enough in distance to where your eye can't resolve the individual satellites themselves. And there's this wonderful paper out there by Fankhauser, I think is how you pronounce it, on satellite optical brightness. And so just using that and again, some geometry, what we're able to do is put that as a potential. And then what I can do is I can actually go on to databases for the different satellites that are up. And I'll say specifically, I'm looking for this group of satellites. I can download or what are called the two-line elements, and I can pull them into software that allows me to simulate not only where the aircraft is, but where those satellites are in their orbit. Now, as Arun mentioned, a past employee of the Aerospace Corporation, which has a software program called the Satellite Analysis Program, which is available to the U.S. government and employees of aerospace. And what I did is modeled it in this, and then I had one of my students model it in another commercially available software called STK. And so what I did in particular was also provide a very zoomed in view of it. And now you can start to see the gaps in here. And those gaps are evident in the video, as I mentioned. And then finally, the last thing I did with this was actually plot from the perspective of the pilots what they should have seen, in addition to actually pulling it in and modeling it in a simulation program. So this one, again, I call it better than 90% debunked in terms of what was identified as the culprit. There was an online individual that had also done something similar, but in the paper we went a lot further to show exactly where those satellites were utilizing the data. Now I want to show you a video from a pilot that is taken of different star lengths that are flaring. And the flaring description, you'll hear pilots talking about. You can kind of see how all these objects are just kind of showing up in front of him, and you see a bunch of them. And what you do is you have a constellation of star lengths up there, and you just got the sunlight hitting it just correct, um, to where it just appears, right? And you'll see flashes, they'll disappear and then reappear. Then you'll see another one flare. So that's the flaring effect. But now I want to go through, what I'm going to call a big data integrity problem. And it's kind of, shown out by the Reddit case. So you actually had somebody go through and fundamentally swipe, if you will, Miss Ray's video from her social media account. And that problem, I would say really slowed me down in terms of being able to get to the final analytical result on this one. I've seen other cases on social media. There's this one here called a Hopi River orbs, where you had an individual on X basically post this, and then he claimed he wanted to talk to scientists about it. So I sent him a message saying, "Hey, here I am. What do you want me to do with this?" And I said I'd be happy to analyze it as long as you provide it to Enigma Labs or one of these other websites. And the reason I do that is I want a very specific chain of custody showing that I'm actually analyzing what he posted. Because I looked at this one and I think I could very easily probably have a student go off and simulate it, i.e., I can take video from a camera that I've got outside, and then I can go frame by frame and inject this object. And so that's a problem. I mean, how do I know that I'm actually working with authentic data, right? Now I'm going to show you this next case and just let you look at just how good people can utilize computer graphics to simulate UAPs. Pretty well done, wouldn't you say? So this is actually done by Dolman Studios as part of an effort to do visual effects, CGI. With their permission, I've got this video being shown. Um, and this was 15 years ago that this came out. This came out in about 2010, if I remember correctly. But it just shows how well people are able, if with a lot of effort, to create these. Now, the problem we have is there's a lot of fakes. I mean, just Google UFO fake, and you'll see lots of cases where people have faked these things. And they actually will tell you how to fake them. And so, for us trying to analyze these different cases, this is a problem. But there are also a lot of good debunkers out there. I've got a few cases here that you've had people try and work on debunking. One of them here is this Go Fast one, which is well known in DoD circles. And so I know Arrow is essentially come out with something on this one recently as well. Arrow, if you don't know, stands for All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. But you can go to these different websites and they will tell you their thoughts anyway in terms of whether it's a fake. And most of debunkers will always try to drive to some kind of a fake. I would say resolution, right? It's either a fake or it's some kind of a nominal object, what we call prosaic. Here's a very specific case where you had this group of kids went out and they literally wanted to create fake UFOs. And so what they did is they planned ahead, and what they did was get some balloons, fill them with helium. They attached some road flares to the bottom of them, released them. Then they got in their car, recorded them, and started calling the news station. And was making, if I remember correctly, even the national news. Now these kind of cases, if I know where the weather is, and when I say where the weather is, I can go download the weather pattern like I showed you from Weather Underground. What I can do is I can say, hey, these things are basically following the winds aloft, or they're following the winds at some altitude, right? And so, here in particular would have been nice if I had triangulation. Um, and then if I had this video to analyze, I could have done those kinds of things. Now, this particular case, what ended up happening was the local attorney general basically got on the news and stated, hey, we know this is a hoax. Turn yourselves in or we're coming after you. So they turned themselves in, basically had what I call a slap on the wrist, minor civil penalties. They also came on and did this entire 1 hour video with Vice about this particular case. And they had said afterwards that the people that are in what they call we call the believer community were adamant that them saying that they had hoaxed it was a government cover-up. So it kind of shows the differences between what we call the debunking community and the believer community. And fundamentally, if you're in the middle just trying to really do a good job and on trying to analyze these cases, fundamentally you might piss somebody off on one side or the other. So we just got to try and be as neutral as possible from a scientific standpoint. Now, what this also points out is there is a hoax arms race going on, where you have these different videos or you got these claims being made. And so what are some of the tools that we can utilize? So for actual image or video analysis, there's a couple of really good tools out there. One is called Amped Authenticate, and the other one's Cognitech TriSuite 64. These are actually used in forensic image and video analysis by law enforcement. There's additional tools that are out there, but they're not as good as these two at the top. In addition, there's the specific things that these tools will look for are going to be Photoshop artifacts. You're going to see image compression artifacts in terms of differences between, for example, a JPEG or an MPEG and trying to insert something into the video. The CGI VFX technology detection, and then deepfake in particular detection. And deepfakes is becoming more and more of a problem as time goes on. The I would say the prototypical DARPA program that's been working on this is called Semaphore. A friend of mine was talking about this with me, and he gave me the website. And so, if you get the slides from this, you can actually follow this down, and it'll give you some of the tools that they're starting to come up with out of DARPA on this. But now I've showed you some of the fakes. Now I'm going to show you some truly anomalous cases. One that I'm still scratching my heads, and I've got other UAP analysts that are also scratching their head on. And so what do we try and look for that makes us scratch our head saying we don't know what it is? First thing we'll look for is odd behavior. The second thing we'll look for is trying to get more than what we call one modality, i.e. more than just the video. If I've gotten the video sent to us fast enough, what we can do is a FOIA request to the FAA for the radar data in that location. We've done that on a few cases. Because when you have the video and the radar, that raises the bar. And so now let's go to the next one. So this particular case here, unfortunately, we only did have the one, I would say one source. But what we try to do is then, let's say, spend a lot of time interviewing the witness, actually trying to, see what, how they talk about how they gathered it, things of that nature to raise the bar. But in general, sometimes we can't get at that, right? But now I want to actually show you this video, and it's going to be sped up. But once you watch it, I'll let you think about what the issues are. But here it is. Now I want you to pay attention down to this part of the video right here, which will show up here in a few seconds. So what you see is this thing is actually going to sit here. It's going to sit here for almost 3 minutes. And so I've got the date. So we've actually gone off and we pulled the ADS-B data for this date, and there is no object above Chattanooga, Tennessee that was doing that. I mean, you got some planes off in the distance, nothing that was directly above this individual's house. For something to sit there, initially, some of the people I talked to, oh, yeah, it's going to be an insect. Well, then I point out, well, okay, then this insect showed up from behind the trees, so I can tell it's above the tree line. And you're telling me that insect is going to sit there and look like a star for 3 minutes. That behavior is abnormal. There really isn't that much out there in terms of natural objects that will have something sitting there for 3 minutes. I know there are other UAP researchers. I know a lady in Europe in particular who's looking at something called pseudostars. And I'll show you a quote on those in a minute, coming back from research done in the 70s and early 80s. The next case I want to show you here is this case from a British pilot. He was flying from Turkey to the UK. He just happened to be over southern Germany at the time, just outside of Muhldorf. And you had this thing showing up. Now, this is the same guy, as I mentioned, that provided the Starlinks. And so, he provided us a bunch of videos, and we were going through the videos, and Ben and I are like, well, those are Starlinks. He goes, no, look at video X. And this is video X. So that's kind of odd. I mean, first off, it doesn't look like an airplane. I actually proposed to them it was an airplane because if I pull the ADS-B data 2 minutes later, I can see from where their aircraft was that there was an airplane that they took down the right side of their aircraft, on the starboard side. But the co-pilot came back and said there was no way that was an airplane. He said I was looking right at it, and it didn't have the normal warning lights. You got like green on one side and red on the other one. You don't see that in this at all. The other thing you see here is from just how it's moving with respect to the background. It can't be something that's a star or something that's in the background like that. You can kind of see it's much closer to the aircraft. Again, looking at the ADS-B data, the only thing I see is an aircraft about 2 minutes later. So this one is in the unresolved category. And actually, as it's sitting there, I could say maybe this is the kind of object that created the prior one, right? So these are two cases that are, I would say, head scratching. Now I'm going to show you another one. And now what's interesting about this particular one is Dr. Kozlowski had talked about it in his Senate hearing in 2024, not specifically this case, but a case very much like it. This particular case happened on April 27th, 2022. Basically, a police officer, Robert Klein, was starting his night patrol. He said he was about 30 minutes into it. There's a reservoir that he has to drive around as part of it. And the reason they do that is kind of make sure that nobody's around that reservoir, as nobody's supposed to be out there in the evenings. But he said he was literally driving along, thinking about his patrol for the night, when all of a sudden he had this very bright light coming in from his left side of his squad car. At first, he thought it was potentially some poachers out there with spotlights. Apparently, they'll use those to daze the deer. And he thought maybe they're just playing with him. But then as he slowed down and stopped, what he said is he couldn't, he was trying to wrap his mind around what he was looking at. He was just in awe. He wasn't scared, but he said it was about the size of Mini Cooper. He said it was a round orb and it was changing colors. I think he said red, brown, and green, if I remember correctly. But as he's watching it, he said for probably upwards of about a minute, because he had rolled his window down as he was stopping. So what he did is had hit it with his spotlight, he said, and almost immediately shot across the reservoir. In which case he thought, geez, I need to record this thing as he's kind of like coming through, and nobody's going to believe me. In fact, when he talks to us, he goes, if I didn't record it, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Because fundamentally, there still is very much a stigma around reporting these things. Now, there still is a significant amount of field work we're doing on this one. But now I'm going to show you the video, and hopefully it plays. This actually broke on News Nation, actually on Thanksgiving Eve. And then they actually sent a reporter out, Brian Etten, while we were actually in Connecticut, trying to get ground truth for where Officer Klein was. We were doing some tests with some Chinese lanterns. Still got that analysis ongoing, as well as Ben Hansen. I bought a 10K lumen light for him to put on it. So there's still a little bit more of what we're doing with that one, but you can kind of see this thing here, and that's what it looks like. Chinese lantern at the moment is my best hypothesis for prosaic. It could be another option would be potentially again a drone with a very bright light on it. But Officer Klein says, with this thing being so close to him, the size of Mini Cooper, he says, like, there's no way it was a drone. He said he would have heard it. And the behavior suggested that there was no way it could have been, either a drone or a Chinese lantern. So this one is definitely still in the head scratching category, and we're still looking into it. But what was interesting is I was talking about this case with one of the SCU executive directors, Rich Hoffman, and he said, it sounds very similar to this project identification orb that was investigated by Southeast Missouri State University, Dr. Harley Rutledge. You can actually go buy this book. It's hard to get it now, but it talks about this. And one of the things that I loved, it had this quote about these pseudo stars or stationary lights that would show up. So they've seen them out in Missouri as well. So it's not, let's say it's not an isolated case. It goes back many years before we really had drone technology. So this is one of these things that makes it a little more curious. So those are three very good examples. Now, potential man-made options for what they could be. Some kind of a ball lightning type thing, the Chinese lantern, as I mentioned. Potentially some kind of a helicopter that didn't have its ADS-B on. The drones, piloted balloons with flights, and, potentially some classified systems that we aren't talking about type thing. But we as a scientific community need to try and remain neutral. And as I mentioned, on one side of the argument, you get the believers who say, everything that you debunk is a government cover up, and then on the other side, you get the debunker saying everything is a prosaic object. But the question is, what are they? What's the root cause of it? What are we actually seeing? That's what we're trying to figure out. Now, let's go there for a second. Let's say it is aliens, okay? Or some kind of what we call non-NHI or non-human intelligence. So does that mean that Einstein's wrong? Well, no, because actually physics has shown that a warp in space could potentially go faster than the speed of light. So you could potentially have a space warp. Miguel Alcubierre, a Mexican physicist, has a famous paper out there where he showed that technically you could make one of these. The only problem is they require what's called negative energy or negative mass. And so the actual engineering of one of these potential warp bubbles is still a problem that we're trying to work through. When I say we, I mean the physics community in general. Another potential option are wormholes. Inside of Einstein's gravitational theory, there's an ability to potentially connect to very distant pieces of space. And it's, the theory there is maybe there's some kind of a wormhole type capability. There's an equation out there which is called ER equals EPR, which fundamentally says that potentially quantum entanglement, which Einstein called spooky action at a distance, may be equivalent to wormholes. So there's a couple of potential ways that if it is, or they are, visiting us from externally, outside of our normal space, that they could have gotten here. And so I'll just throw that out there. Again, I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying, okay, those are possibilities, right? Now, what are some pie in the sky technologies and potential legislation that would help us out? Cell phone-based triangulation applications are one. Bistatic radar, potentially using gigahertz frequencies from radio stations or Starlinks or other sources. But when it comes to helpful legislation and capabilities, I mean, for me, me personally, if I had to pick two off this list, number one, it would be an ability to get radar for much longer than 45 days, which I believe is what the FAA's restriction is for doing a FOIA request. And then I would say the second one would be some kind of an ADS-B like capability for drones. ADS-B for drones would be wonderful, and potentially could utilize cell phone towers, right? I do know right now that they're broadcasts information, but it's not ubiquitous. It's not being captured, and I don't have any ability to go look through some database after the fact. Now, to wrap up what I've got in the slides, I've got some references for you. I maintain a GitHub site where you can actually go actually look at some of the analysis I've done. And what I do is I've also got on this site my publicly given talks. One of them is the data integrity talk that I gave at SUAPS. Some good books. Robert Powell, SCU executive director, has got a wonderful new book out there published in April of last year. And then here's a couple of papers, or this specific paper on the satellite optical brightness, the Rutledge book I mentioned, and then a link to the Mansfield News Nation when it went viral, and then a Wikipedia link on the ER equals EPR. And then finally, a legal disclaimer, all of this is my opinion, does not represent the opinions of either University of Utah or Stevens Institute of Technology. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
All right, Doug, thank you for that great presentation. You can come on camera if you're
There we
okay.
go.
We've got a couple of questions coming in, and remember, you can type in your questions in the question box. We have some time to answer some here. My first question is, in one of your early slides, you talked about fake data in biomedical papers.
Mhm.
And so I guess I guess if someone with a bio background gave this some presentation, they might go through hoaxes like you did, fake data. Would they, at the end of their presentation, also say there's unexplained bio data?
I gave that bio data example just because I was looking for specific technologies, right, that were available to help you try and identify some of these faked hoaxes. My recollection, and I'd have to honestly go back and look at that case, but I think the reason I pulled it in is it was off looking at, for example, biomedical data that just didn't make sense, or there was some information in the graphics that potentially led you to believe that it was actually faked data. Now, whether or not it's utilized or can be utilized for this problem, I don't know. I'd have to actually go look at it a little bit more.
All right, next question. Someone's asking if you can clarify what you meant by flaring effect, I guess with the Starlinks.
Yeah, so the flaring effect,
Is it a
so
reflectivity of light issue, or is it
yeah,
something?
it's literally going to be the satellite is in a certain geometry. So when the sunlight hits it, it's going to be in a specular reflection geometry. So it's hitting at one angle, and it's going to be mainly leaving at that same angle off that surface. Now, the problem we have with Starlinks is we don't know exactly what orientation they're in, right? But I will tell you that they're in at a specific altitude where when the sunlight does hit it, it's reflecting. It will have a very fast specular reflection to where like literally the entire sun's light that's hitting it is being redirected towards your eyeball. And it will only happen for a very short period in the orbit as it's in the sun. That specular reflection is at its maximum, and then it leaves, and then it will appear to disappear, right? And so that's what the flaring effect is.
Next question is there evidence of foreign actors trying to pass off operations as things of extraterrestrial origin as a way to throw off counterintelligence efforts?
Well, I will tell you, there's evidence of us doing it. i.e., I'll just try to think of the right way to put this. I would say the establishment has, long loved the fact that there is this explanation that they could hide, or we could hide some of our advanced craft behind, right? I'm think the one that comes to mind is the F-117, right? And so when the F-117 crashed, there was a lot of speculation that, that was an NHI vehicle that went out and recovered, which, the apparatus, if you will, was tickled pink with, because everybody's thinking aliens, right? And we're thinking, oh, push, I can keep my stealth aircraft, quiet for for a few more years. So foreign actors, I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Do people make a habit of researching, is it MUFON, MUFON,
Yeah.
Mutual UFO Network, cases? Do you get a lot of false alarms, right? Can anyone submit a case?
My understanding, I don't work that much with MUFON. My understanding, anyone can submit a case. And then it's just, they're volunteers in terms of, whether or not they want to pick up the case. I will say there's a lot of, I will say, political angst between SCU executive directors and MUFON, because they all came from there, every single one of them. And so from within the SCU, is I'm on the board of directors, so I'm going to try and just leave it at that. But I would say we have an approach, and the MUFON has an approach. And so for the SCU, for example, when something comes in that's got video data behind it, I'm one of the individuals that they usually contact to analyze it.
Uh, you talked about real government funding
Mhm.
as being something that would help clarify some of these cases, improve the ability in the future.
Yeah.
Is there any real government funding at this point? Is there
No.
any use of government assets at
When
this
I
point?
say when I say real, when you say real government funding, my answer is real government funding is in the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars. I've got universities working on it. I can go point at professors, right, that are working on building stuff. And I know the professors working on this stuff. It's self-funded, or they've got angel investors, rich people that are interested in the topic throwing money at them. For example, Galileo project, that is not government funded. That is completely Avi Loeb going out and getting money from people who want to give him money to do it. Same with UAPX, same with all the other organizations that are out there that are trying to do this. It's pretty predominantly self-funded or through angel investors. You don't have the government throwing money at this. I keep hoping, based on what I heard in Aero, briefings to both the Senate and Congress. Well, Aero just briefed the Senate, but you had obviously people like Admiral Gallaudet and others who would relish the government starting to throw real money behind this for independent university researchers. Number one, it will help remove the stigma. Number two, I mean, you can get some valuable data off of it. I mean, personally, I think of the drone problem, the New Jersey drone flap. If we had, let's say, a concerted effort behind being able to identify things in the sky right now, we probably would know exactly what that is versus what I'll call the government, I would say, almost, slap in the face in terms of what they said it was.
What is the velocity range typically of the objects that you're able to look at?
Great question. I'll say that some of the thing, and again, it's going to be a perspective and how far away it is, right? So let's take a satellite, right? There you're talking tens of thousands of miles per hour, upwards of, right? Depending on how far out it is, what it's doing. Um, and then, I mean, if I'd have to go look at the orbital dynamics again, but my recollection, it was in a upwards of, right? If I've got something very fast coming in, like for example, a meteor is an excellent example of something that can be coming in really, really fast. And then if I got on the slower side, that object you had in the very first example I showed you, it goes from literally stopped, right, not moving at all, from relative speed between that camera and it, to then moving off and doing some funny patterns. If I knew how far away it was, then I could estimate, what those velocities were. Let's just say, for example, it's about 30,000 feet, right? It's probably in the few hundreds of miles per hour. An aircraft can be 500 miles per hour, for example. And then you're going to have some of your more exotic aircraft, right? Again, I got to think about what are the prosaics I got to remove before I can say it's anomalous. And so that's the range. Now, one of these objects, for example, that orb, I've got two different witnesses claiming it was like in one spot and then like almost instantaneously it's in a different spot, right? And so what instantaneous means and all that, I don't have the right data to be able to tell you how fast it went from point A to point B, other than they're saying it was instantaneous. So it's a range, very wide range.
What's your level of confidence that detection techniques can stay ahead of deep fakes?
Uh, Personally, I think we're losing right now. Because the types of analytical software, for example, I went and got the AMP software. Um, I don't have the government funding to go off and purchase that, or I don't have an angel investor to allow me to purchase that and use that. That's why I say we're losing, right? I don't have funding to be able to get the tools or help build the tools to be able to analyze this stuff properly. I mean, I could have, if I had just saying for me, if I had like say 2 to 3 grad students and I was building AI tools, then I'd be able to have a better job of staying on top of it. But we just don't have that funding right now. It doesn't exist.
The question on the stigma that you mentioned, from a scientific and cultural perspective, what's the current psychological, societal response to UAPs?
It's getting better. Are we there yet? No, but it is getting better.
And so
That's
then,
about all I can say about that. I mean, because I still have people, for example, when I gave a talk last week, when I started showing some of those anomalous ones, people will start, well, could it be this? I already thought through that. This is why it can't be. Well, what about this? Thought through that one too. This is why it can't be that. And so you still have that, and then it's like, all right, well, I'll try and keep an open mind, right? Um, and then I have people that will just start laughing at me when I say, hey, I'm working on X. It's just kind of a hobby, and oh yeah, well, that's a waste of time, right? So, but it's getting better. That's fewer and fewer. You get cases like the New Jersey drone flap, where maybe it was Chinese showing UAP or UAVs that they've got, right? And so if that's the case, I'll say, oh, let's go back. So Mick West and I have talked on Twitter, right? And I told him, I said, one of my frustrations, Mick, is what if some of these are Chinese drones? They're coming across, and just because of the attitude of the community saying it's got to be, a balloon or something, and we know we've got Chinese balloons we've had to shoot down, right? So the stigma has to go away. We have to be able to get it at root cause, and some of them will be prosaic, and then hopefully all of them are, or not. I don't know.
um, to torture your clue analogy here, it, in in any of the unexplained cases you talk about, is there anything in terms of intent or origin or even consciousness that can be inferred? The other way it was phrased was you talk a lot about the what and the how, but in the unexplained cases, is there anything that you can get at to as to the who and the why? And motive was never a part of the clue game. That would be a new advanced clue game.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example on the orb. So when we were sitting there meeting with Officer Klein, we were interviewing him. I pointed out to everybody, it's like, hey, okay, he hit it with a flash, right? That response, okay, everybody knows fight or flight, right? You've got two choices in a scenario where you feel like you're going to get attacked. I can fight or I can flee. It chose to flee. And so that shows intent. Now, could it be a potential coincidence that it jumped, is it possible Officer Klein was lying? Maybe, but based on our discussions with him, and I spent some one-on-one time with him. No, the guy saw something. I mean, he saw something that freaked him out. And I'll tell you that I've got lots of other people that are contacting me. They find out I'm working on this, and like they're asking me what's going on. They feel that these things are genuinely curious, assuming that they're NHI. Um, and maybe they're just being careful because you're contacting a young race. I mean, let's think about it. We're still back in the Stone Ages. You can just watch the progression of technology and you can see how much better it's getting. I mean, gosh, take a cell phone. Did you have a cell phone in your pocket 20 years ago? No. You had a bigger thing, right? Maybe attached to your side and then go back 30 and 40 years. The answer is no. They were on the wall. So we're getting smarter, but my feeling is assuming that it's NHI, it's a curiosity, we're ants to them as far as I'm concerned. And maybe they're just studying us or whatever. So that's my opinion.
All right, last question is a pretty standard Tech 101 question. It's about our international community. Is there an international community? Is there less stigma elsewhere? And then standard question, are we in first place on UAP research?
We are in
Chinese
last
and
place,
Russians
but
ahead of us.
if we are in last place, I will the Russia and China. That's a great question. Um, I will tell you that, for example, there's Norway, there's the Hesdalen lights. Those university researchers have basically done way better science than we've done on anything here in this country. And people know about it. I can go to their website. I can see the research they've done. Anybody that's watched the Skinwalker Ranch series, I dare you to point to a paper that they've published that I can go pull up and read. That has been my biggest criticism of them. I'm not seeing technical work coming out of them. I'm seeing a show, right? Where they're firing rockets into try and poke the hornet's nest. And so fundamentally, are we behind based on what I've seen that's been publicly available? I believe we are, because again, we are not getting publicly funded at the university level. Now, if you want to go inside of some of your DoD companies, according to some of the rumors, potentially there's funding going through in black programs and what have you. But I'll tell you, we, the public, don't know what's going on.
All right, with that, Doug, Dr. Bittner, I want to thank you for that great presentation, and I want to thank everyone for their attendance and all the great questions. We didn't get to anywhere near all of them. We're going to be posting this recording online as soon as possible. If you have feedback about this event or future topics you'd like to see us cover, please email us at eti@ndia.org. I want to take this opportunity to highlight a few upcoming events. The next Tech 101 will be on Modular Open Systems Approach, MOSA. And that'll be April 22nd, 2025. Look at NDIA's calendar of events for more information and registration information. Our August conference is August 27th through 29th, the Emerging Technologies for Defense Conference. That's where we work with the Undersecretary for Research and Engineering, Acquisition Sustainment, the CDAO, UCOM and AFRICOM to put together a conference that looks at advanced technologies and how best to move them quickly into production and operational use. That'll be at the Convention Center, August 27th through 29th. Registration, sponsorship, exhibit information will be opening soon. And finally, I want to point everyone at the Emerging Tech Horizons podcast, which you can find on YouTube or anywhere you find your podcast. We did a good one with Dr. Bittner, but we've done them with government officials, industry officials, as well as NDI members, including on location at NDI events. To catch up on anything that we're working on and register for them, whether it's NDIA or ETI, please visit www.ndia.org/events. Thanks again, Doug, and thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.